There ain't nothing as intimate as a church on a Sunday morning in the Deep South. I was born and bred there. Preachin' was practically in my soul. That's why I became a preacher. Speaking to the masses as they hold your hand and SOB for sins they have yet to commit with you. Hell, I was an addict, and every Sunday I relapsed on that sweet sensation. My congregation was small, but that was all the better for a young buck like myself. I knew every face that came to God's table, from Ms. Mary, who baked pastries every Sunday, to James, who, despite being 70 years young, still did the job of altar boy like he had when he was 6. We were a family, till that serpent wandered into my garden. He didn't say too much at first, just sat front and center of those pews and watched me like a wolf up on a hill. I believe the first time I saw him, I intended to shake his hand after the sermon, but he slithered out at the last hymn. He was an odd-looking feller. Not a bad one by anyone's means, but odd. He wore a black wool suit with a deep blue tie, looked expensive and heavy. At this time, it was the pits of July. That sun beat down on us like a nun with a ruler, but as God is my witness, that man never broke a sweat. His face was always as dry as the cement in the lot. His face was pale, too. It was clear to me from the get that he treated his body like an altar. It was the smell that made my blood turn to ice. From head to toe, he smelt of meat that had been sitting out for weeks in the boiling sun. This wasn't a smell that came off with a bath either. It was the kind to fester under the skin. I could feel it trying to claw into me the closer I got. My Meemaw would say that's the smell of an unclean soul. I almost gagged. I aborted my mission of conversing with the newcomer and excused myself to the bathroom instead. When I came back, I watched from afar, but something was off. He conversed in small talk as he shook the hands of the other churchgoers, though I couldn't make out his exact words. They smiled so widely at him. Not the God-loving, peaceful smiles of Eden I was used to, but the kind of smile that isn't yours. The one you make when someone pushes your mouth up. Watching him talk felt like catching my congregation in an act of adultery, so before I could do anything out of envy, I made my way to my office. I knew I was being stupid. A pastor afraid of a servant of God? It was ridiculous, but as Mother Time made her way through my church like honey on a hook, I grew to resent him. Hate steeped in me, and it felt every time his piercing blue eyes fell upon my sermon. My soul became muddied with each passing week. My loyal flock of sheep paid more attention to the hills than the shepherd. Halfway through August is when that damned fruit started. Bowls of fruit would appear everywhere in my church. The kitchen, the altar, even the office, which no one but me had a key to. So ripe and so flawless. I felt a pot of rage climb to a boil every time I saw those apples. The serene silences between the Lord's words were broken with the cracking of apples or the soft chewing of blueberries. It shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did, none of it, but I couldn't help but draw a connection to the man. The man who seemed to be crowded like a piece of rotten fruit in a fly's nest. Their smiles. My sheep. My congregation was mostly older folk, and the sight of their toothless, rotten, and dentured mouths beaming at this man, I couldn't sleep for a long, long while. He felt like the bottle, something I had given up years ago. I was intoxicated around him. Yet, when I walked away after the smell, I felt sick and depressed. I prayed for him to go away, and one December he did. Not without his price, however. It was a cold Wednesday morning in the midst of winter. I walked into the church in the early morning to rehearse the candlelit night swiftly approaching. I hadn't sat down for 5 minutes before I heard something from the chapel. God's house was always a safe haven for me. This morning, it was as safe as Babel at high noon. I felt fear run its course in my being. I followed the noise to the chapel. Inside, I froze. There stood the man and my congregation. They were all crying. Tears slid down their wrinkled faces like molasses down a glass. Mary knelt in front of the altar. Her eyes were glazed over, and a smile was carved into her face from cheek to cheek. From my pulpit, the man screamed at the flock. The words he shouted were honeyed and lifting but incoherent. Not quite Latin, but not quite anything at all. I felt a seething migraine as I strained to make out the words. Only one phrase sliced through the sermon of incoherence. God anointed Cain with a lamp of oil. That's when the smell hit me. Behind the man's smell of rot was something even more potent. It smelled like gasoline. Then my face fell in horror as James walked down the aisle like he had every Sunday. He was walking with a cane usually, yet this morning that cane was nowhere in sight. With every second step there was a limp that made me hold my breath in fear of James dropping the candle. Hot wax dripped off the candle onto James's bare hands. He didn't so much as flinch. He wore a toothless grin as he stumbled to the pulpit. He looked like a child on Christmas morning. New stains were swirling in the carpet, in the clothes that the congregation was wearing, yet they were all smiling wide as they watched James walk toward them with candle in hand. God help me, I tried. I begged my congregation for the sake of their lives. I tried to move them, pull them away, but it was no use. Nothing stopped the slow coming forth of the candle. James had incredible strength suddenly, a frail old man's frame, yet it felt like ramming into a football player. Mary's head was tilted back. I thought of when I baptized her. She had the same look on her face as a single drop of wax dripped from James's hand onto her forehead. I ran right then. Before seeing the searing hot flame touch my Mary's head, I turned my back on my flock. I didn't have the courage to look back. I wish I could say I regret turning away, but I feared as Lot did. In Genesis 19:17, God says, "Escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed." I didn't dare. A shepherd is supposed to watch over their flock. I tried, nothing changed. I could do nothing, as a wolf carried away my sheep between its maw. Later that day, they began pulling bodies out of the rubble, the high southern sun cooking the bodies as badly as fire. Even now, I can't pull the smell from my nostrils. I scanned the headlines for weeks, but he vanished without a trace. I read as all the faces I had grown to know as good as my own were requesting verification. That man was never among them. I moved north, tried my damnedest to forget. But just 2 days ago, I found a rotten apple in my old satchel. Oh Lord, the stench. It was as familiar as a long-lost lover. This affair had me in tears at the sight of the fruit. The stench was that wretched rotting I had loathed for decades. Under that was the subtle but deeply seeped gasoline. I prayed that night for the first time in years. For I know he'll be coming for the shepherd next.